As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for every one of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we respond to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. With a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Good luck trying to get home before you're disturbed. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, then this isn't going to fix that. This makes you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, and then you hopefully do things that change that. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, and as Hunter summed it up for us a few moments ago, it's just learning to be nice to everyone, including yourself, which if I hadn't so rudely cut him off, I'm sure he would have added that part. You've got to be nice to yourself, too. It's a practice. It's not a quick fix. If you're new to Buddhism or new to meditation, it's not something you do for 1 week or 6 weeks and then move on. Most people come into this practice because they want to try it or they want to learn more about it. And ultimately, all you're learning about is yourself. And then the question is, how long do you want to try that? A lot of people give up on that. But that's what this practice is. The person that makes you happy and peaceful and calm all day long is the same person that makes you angry, stressed out, and miserable all day long. And that's the person you're stuck with. That's yourself. The beauty of that is it doesn't require anything or anyone else to bring us a sense of happiness or calm or peace. As the Buddha taught, we are all already awakened, meaning we have everything it takes to awaken, to figure out how to end our suffering, to figure out how to suffer less. We just have to practice generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. Practice these things in your daily life. Less greed, less anger, less ignorance. That's the practice. It's not complicated. But the majority of the things that we encounter throughout our day are not telling us to do and act and think and be like everything we look at and hear. So we don't do this practice to be good at this practice. There's not meditation in Buddhism and then the rest of your life. It's really all the same thing. Meditation, Buddhist practice, your life is all the same thing. We learn this so we can bring it into everything we do all day long. Not to change them, not to convince them, not to fix them, not to correct them, not to teach them our way, but to actually learn to be okay with their way. We don't like doing that. Learn to understand why other people do things the way they do. No need to hate them or judge them or critique them. We've probably done a few things wrong in our lives. Maybe one or two. So we practice to begin to understand why people do the things they do. And if we can understand that, then it makes it a little bit easier to work within that construct. So I'd rather just stop there. And as always, I prefer to open up to questions. I'd much rather address things that are on your mind, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll go from there. And Hunter's back, so if we have questions, I can just defer to him. Yeah.
Do you mind talking a little bit about envy?
About envy? Sure. So, as soon as you said that word, the first story that popped up into my head immediately, years ago, there was an individual who, she came to Downtown Temple on and off quite a bit, Buddha for you a little bit, and she talked about that day. I remember her question, and the way she phrased it, I'm just trying to sum up the important part. But she said she got into an elevator, and the person in the elevator had on a business suit, kind of briefcase type thing, dressed really well, professionally, blah, blah, blah. The way she described it is she thought this other woman looked very important, powerful. And she was in her sweatpants, flip-flops, sweatshirt. And she said she was standing there, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but you'll get the idea. She said she was standing in the elevator looking at this person and wishing as she was her. She talked about that for a little while. And as she was talking, realization I had popped into my head, and I said to her, how do you know that the person in the business suit with the briefcase looking all important isn't looking at you and thinking, I wish I could just be in sweatpants, sweatshirt, flip-flops, right? What is there to envy in someone else? We don't even know anything about anyone. But somehow we want to be like others, look like others, act like others, have what others have. I don't really understand why. Other than some story in our head that tells us if we have what they have, if we get what they get, if we go where they go, that's going to bring us some sense of happiness. We don't know that. So I ended up asking this person, if you put on those shoes and those pants and that suit and that everything, how would you feel? She said, miserable. Then why do you want that? It's all tied to a story. We talk about stories a lot that we tell ourselves. The story of if only this had happened, if only that had happened. But we also tell stories to ourselves about others. Anyone in this room suffering? We all struggle. And so, to me, I look at the Buddhist teachings and I think about just having gratitude for being alive and having the experience that I have. Some good, some bad. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. It's what the Buddha taught. Envy, jealousy, all these things and thoughts that we have towards others, they'll destroy you. You've heard me say it enough by now, but the Suzuki Roshi quote of "You're all perfect exactly how you are, and you all could use a little improvement." He didn't say you're all perfect exactly how you are, now you need to go try to be like everybody else. That would have been a terrible quote from a Zen master, right? They got their own mess. Yeah. Does that give you stuff to think about until Saturday? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier dependent origination, and that's a hard concept for me to understand. I think it has something to do with how everything is interconnected.
Yes, it does, and yes, it is. And as I say after the meditation, it is the basis of the Buddhist awakening. When he fully understood that everything is dependent upon something else for its existence, that was in essence the moment that he realized what this whole thing is about. Now, for me, I look at all of the Buddhist teachings that I've come across and explored, and I ask myself, okay, how can I apply this to my daily life? And then how can I try to share it with others so they can apply it to their daily life, right? The bench right there, right? It's a wooden bench. We often come up and we sit on it, right? Oh yeah, there's benches out there too, right? So how many of you sat down on that bench and thought to yourself, wow, people have been sitting on these benches for 92 years. How many of you thought, I know it might be a little dirty. We clean them, don't worry. How many of you thought, wow, people worked really hard to create these benches? Trees were cut down for the benches. The sun, water, everything that went into creating the tree The people's lives that were impacted by the people who made the benches for people to sit on them for 92 years. People have sat through weddings, they've sat through funerals, they've sat through so many things. Just in that one seat. But what do we typically do? We just come in and sit down. And we think, how does this bench serve me? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I approve of it? Am I envious of it? Am I jealous of it? Am I angry at it? So to me, dependent origination is when you meet somebody, right? Because life is more about just understanding the history of benches. Now apply what I just did to people. You ever been angry at someone? You ever think they did something really mean and nasty to you? Do you think they were suffering? Do you have any idea what anyone else has ever gone through? No. But what we do at that moment is we say, you're being mean to me, I don't like you. We don't know what they've gone through. We don't know their 92-year history. It's a metaphor. Right? So to me, to bring dependent origination into the interactions with humans, animals, insects, is critical. Otherwise, we just meet them at where we are, and we think, how can you serve me? What can I get out of you? Is that?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It's really applicable towards people that you don't like. You may have one or two of those in your life. I just mentioned, so I don't want to assume anything.
Right?
Even politicians. Yeah, you said it, not me. I was just repeating you. Yeah. The rest of the people in here, a lot of you I know you don't like people. You I just met, so maybe you're the one person who likes everybody. But especially with those who challenge us, right? There's a beautiful loving kindness meditation is to send loving kindness and understanding and forgiveness to everybody. It's somewhat easy to send it to those we love. It's really difficult to send it to those we dislike. But we have to understand that we don't know where they're coming from. Doesn't mean we agree with them. Doesn't mean we think they're right. You mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh, right? He has one of my favorite, probably just the greatest teaching ever. He says nirvana, which is freedom from suffering, is freedom from views. You can Google what is nirvana. It's a YouTube clip about 5 minutes and 42 seconds long. It's a great talk. What is nirvana, Thich Nhat Hanh? Freedom from views. Imagine going your life and being free from views. Now, I talk about this a lot, but in brief, I don't listen to that and think to myself, I'm never going to have a view in my entire life because I'm having a view of what he says. You're having a view of what I'm saying right now. Do I agree? Do I disagree? Do I like? Do I not like? To me, freedom from views means, can I understand that every other human being has their own views based on their conditioned experience of life? Instead of spending my entire life defending my view and thinking my view is right. I am right, you're wrong. I am this, you are that. Yeah. Does that help?
That was very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
So earlier we referenced dependent origination, and that got me to thinking that Buddha, as I understand it, was in his 30s when he reached enlightenment. I'm guessing before he reached enlightenment, he probably had some bad habits, and many of which were either repeated and thus dependent origination. He kept doing that. What do you imagine he did to overcome those bad patterns that he picked up at that point in his life?
Do you want to know if you're on pace with the Buddha to awaken? Is that what you're getting at? Because I think you're a little behind. So the question of, the Buddha awakened at 35, and for those who don't know, the word Buddha just means awakened. He was a human being, and they said, we call you the Buddha. You are the awakened one. You figured some stuff out. And so the question is, Evan is assuming that the Buddha had some bad habits, and I'm quoting you, prior to awakening, and that he then overcame those bad habits. So your question is, what did he do to overcome those bad habits?
Yes.
He stopped doing them. you want to rephrase your question? Is your question, how did he stop doing them?
Yes.
Very simply, he just stopped. Why did he stop doing them? Because they brought pain and suffering to him and others. Where did he stop doing them? Nepal, India. When? Long time ago. Yeah. That's great. I've never had anyone ask if the Buddha ever had bad habits, so I appreciate your question. Yes, Hunter.
So in the book, there was this monkey. The monkey, why does that monkey have to be sad, and why does he have to be like a demon? Why can't it just be like a talking monkey?
Man, that's a deep question. So the question is, in the book, the eldest monkey?
That's the story of the Monkey King. We were just listening to it, and he obtains some armor and a very powerful weapon to take out some demons, and one of the Buddhas ends up stopping him to place him under a mountain for 500 years.
Right, the
And,
Monkey King.
yeah, he follows a monk to India to obtain some scrolls.
Swan song.
We haven't gotten to the end yet, so I think he thinks you know the end of the story.
Oh, I'm not going to give you the spoiler alert. Yeah, spoiler. So, is it good to hurt people or bad? Bad. And so, if somebody was going to hurt someone, would it be good to stop them from hurting someone? Yes. And would it be good to eventually learn that we should not hurt other people? Yeah. So if we can do things that help other people and stop other people from not hurting others, is that a good thing? Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yes. Thank you. You let me know how the book ends up, all right? Thank you. Yes.
I guess this is sort of similar to asking about the Buddha's bad habits, but it's more asking, I guess, you.
My bad habits?
No, not your bad habits, but how you deal with maybe obsession. Like, I don't like going through the day only thinking about one thing because it's like the only thing keeping me going. But at the same time, I can feel part of me wanting to obsess over better or good things that might benefit me, you know, like improving at a skill or a job or working and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I don't know if meditation or Buddhist philosophy has provided to you any skills to deal with obsession over something.
Yeah, I mean, so for those who are brand new to Buddhism, the cause of our suffering, greed, anger, ignorance, they call three poisons, really based in the sense of self, ego, me, mine, kind of back to what I said earlier, how does this bench serve me? How does this person serve me? It has to do with this idea that we have constant craving, right? That was what the Buddha was able to overcome, is the craving and desire for things to be different from how they are. Right? So he also said that there, and I talked about this, I think it was Saturday morning, or maybe last Tuesday, but that there are healthy cravings. The craving to end suffering is a healthy craving, right? Without the craving and desire to suffer less, we wouldn't do it. So I just want to put that in context. But your question specifically is, how does one deal with obsessions that potentially are unhealthy, right? And are there tools to kind of use to get through that? Yeah? You know, I grew up as a kid obsessed with everything. And that obsession just changed, right? And then I became obsessed eventually with Buddhist practice. And it became something that was probably an unhealthy obsession, but at least it wasn't causing harm. And then eventually that obsession kind of fades away and you realize that it's just something you do, something you work on, something you practice. But I think, does that make sense so far? Yeah, but I think the real question is, how does one do that? And I think one does that by really facing the suffering. It's like when someone asks if I'm with my parents and someone says, how did Jeff get into Buddhism? My dad will kind of joke and he'll say, years of pain and suffering. Right? Now that pain and suffering didn't come from them. That pain and suffering didn't come from anyone else. That pain and suffering came from right here. And the tool I use to get through all of these obsessions to eventually lead to a healthier path is to say, I'm just sick and tired of suffering. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of wanting to not live. I'm tired of that. That was the tool. But that required me being very honest with that. Not jumping to another thing to mask that or to cover that or to fix that, which is really what craving and desire and obsessions do, is they just give you something to lose your mind in, as opposed to facing what things are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because if I could
Yeah.
just add on that last point, it's like whenever I try to fix this obsession, I replace it with a different obsession. Maybe even like in my mind, it's just going to be temporarily until I fix this obsession. And it's just like, either now I have two obsessions or, and just give the second one up. And
Right.
it's still the same. It's still coming from the same place, and I'm still going to have the same problems no matter what obsession it is. It's just there's certain
I think two things on a very practical level, and that's why I just tried to give a very real example that I recognized an obsession for Buddhist practice or being around Buddhist temples or reading Buddhist stuff. Still an obsession, but it wasn't causing harm.
Right, exactly.
Right? But it was still feeding the ego. I remember years ago, the first time I could say Pratitya Samupata, and that's not even correct, I'm sure. But in my mind, I thought it was correct. I remember the ego and the pride feeling so wonderful that I could rattle off the Four Noble Truths, or I could rattle off the Eightfold Path. Like that was just driven by ego and pride. They said, look at me, I'm better than you because I have these memorized. It's ridiculous. But again, I justified that in my head saying, yes, this is driven by pride, driven by ego, but I'm not doing what I was doing before.
Right.
Also driven by pride and ego, but creating a lot of harm.
Yeah.
This pride and ego, but wasn't creating harm. But it still required that real, honest look that just says, I don't want to be this way anymore.
How can you genuinely be interested in something then? I guess this is sort of a tangent almost, but it feels like I like in your situation, you're obsessing over something because of ulterior motives, not actually because you're interested in it or want to learn the Four Noble Truths for the sake of learning the Four Noble Truths. You're learning it for your ego.
It was both.
Well, okay.
I was really obsessed over learning all of it because I thought it was the thing that was going to end all of my suffering.
Yeah.
And I learned all of it and memorized all of it and realized, oh wait, I'm still suffering.
Would you know how to almost erase the part of it that isn't just genuine interest in an obsession?
I think that and it's hard to get in kind of general terms, but I think, look at what your obsessions are. Look at what you obsess over on a daily basis. Look at the ones that are healthy, ones that are unhealthy, and ones that are neutral, right? Ones that are harming self and others, and ones that are not harming self and others, right? We can obsess over Netflix for 7 hours straight. Might not be the most harmful thing in the world. Definitely not the most helpful thing in the world, right? So what I'm hearing is a lot of it, like trying to get into this analytical understanding. And I think it's more of an experience of what am I obsessing over? Healthy, unhealthy, or neutral? And ultimately it comes back to the sense of the ego that says, I am permanent and I must fix and solve and correct me. And trying to work through letting go of that part of the practice and just focusing on what am I thinking? What am I saying? What am I doing? And are those thoughts and words and actions driven by greed, anger, ignorance? Or are those thoughts, words, and actions driven by generosity, compassion, and wisdom? And if I make that the basis of what I do throughout my day, then chances are I'll suffer less, and those around me will suffer less. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Do one more before we wrap up.
Can you talk about no gift, no giver, no receiver?
Sure. So, were you spinning on it from when I said it recently, or?
I think a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So the question was, can I talk about no gift, no giver, no receiver? Just to give it a little bit of context and background for those who are not familiar with this practice, this is what's called the Bodhisattva practice. Bodhisattva is an enlightened being. I like to refer to Bodhisattvas like angels. They're people who vow to be reborn life after life to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. If you're not a fan of the whole rebirth thing or reincarnation thing, that's fine. Just think of it as people who are waking up every day to do nothing but help people with their suffering. That is the Bodhisattva vow and the Bodhisattva practice. The Bodhisattva practice is based on what's called the 6 paramitas. Paramitas are perfections, right? Someone asked earlier about the elephant, the tusks. 6 tusks represent the 6 paramitas. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. These are the 6 practices of the Bodhisattva that help you on your path and help others suffer less, right? One of the teachings of the Bodhisattva is this idea behind, the word is dana, which is generosity. It's to give. First and foremost, understand that the greatest gift taught by the Buddha is to give the Dharma. That is the greatest thing you can give, right? The idea behind no gift, no giver, no receiver is, you ever given somebody something and they didn't like it? How'd you feel when they didn't like it? Personally offended. You ever given somebody something that they liked? How'd you feel when they?
Personally satisfied.
Personally satisfied. I see a lot of personal in there, right? So just in that brief example, you gave them something, they didn't like it, you felt personally, I forgot what word you used.
Offended.
Offended, sorry. You felt personally offended. They liked it, you felt personally satisfied. So your gift, really, the giving of it is done. But you were so heavily involved in wanting to know how their receiving of that gift made you feel. So was the gift really about you, or was it about them? Right? We think it's about them. But if you give them something and they don't like it, what's wrong with that? Oh, I put a lot of time and effort into it. I spent a lot of money on it. I really thought this. But we are attached to the expectations when we give things, right? So no gift, no giver, no receiver is to not be attached to the outcome, right? Whatsoever. It's the intention of the gift. Now, I like to think of gifts also in words, smiles, hugs, whatever you give. Just put out there without any attachment to how it's received or not received. Because if you think about just dialogue with people, we spend so much time wanting to make sure we say things that people like. Why? Why do we want to be liked so much? Why do we want approval from everyone? Why do we even have envy for others? Because we're not comfortable with who we are. And that's the saddest part of all. So when we give someone something, we want them to like it so we feel good. Right? I mean, how cool would it be if we actually lived in this honest world where you give someone a gift and you're like, thank you, but I don't really like this. And then you're like, okay, I'm sorry, I got you a gift you didn't like. Cool. Let's go get you something you like. Could you imagine that dialogue ever taking place? No, there's so many lies and manipulations around that. But wouldn't that be cool? It would make things a hell of a lot easier. Right? It makes shopping for people a lot easier. That's for sure. You know, years ago, and I tell the story once in a while when I was in college, and this was 20-something years ago, and I'll never forget one of my dear old friends, Josh Goldberg, really wonderful guy, very giving guy, and he's the kind of guy he'd do anything for you, still would. And we were back at the house one night, and it was probably 2 a.m., and you can imagine a college house at 2 a.m. 6-year-olds in the room, so I don't want to say too much. And he'd ordered a pizza. And he came in with the pizza. And we were like, oh my God, there's pizza. And so he starts walking and he walks up the stairs. And I remember saying, hey, Josh, or hey, Goldie, can I get a piece? And he looked at me and he said, normally, yes. But I'm really hungry and I want to eat all of this myself. And then he walked up the stairs. And you have no idea how many times I've worked that into Dharma talks, because it is that truth that is so raw and so real and so beautiful, but we're so afraid of. No gift, no giver, no receiver. And if you think about that, if you've never heard that teaching or that practice, pay attention to it now. Pay attention to it when you let somebody, which I know you all do because you're wonderful, kind people, when someone is driving and they want to get in the lane in front of you. Pay attention to when you slow down, which you will, I'm sure, and let them in. And then you're looking for them to either wave and thank you, and all of a sudden they don't say thank you, and now you're pissed off again. A total stranger that you let get in front of you didn't acknowledge you with gratitude. And you're like, well, I'm never letting anybody in again. We do little things like that all day long. How attached we are to what we give. I mean, the Buddha said the first thing is suffering because of greed. And the greatest practice is to give. Why? Because it lets go of all of our attachments that we think are so important. Especially the ego and the pride.
Yeah, no, I'm the way we think of it, because I've already talked about that before.
Yeah.
Talking about obsessions is what you were basically saying is you need to check your motivations.
Always.
The same thing with no gift, no giver.
Always. My motivation is to buy a gift for this person. Knowing maybe they'll love it, maybe they'll hate it, and maybe it'll be somewhere in between. But I'm buying a gift because I care and I want to give them a gift. What they do with it, that's on them. That's why they make gift receipts. So, yes, we'll close with Hunter.
So I actually had kind of the same problem with that one, when you said, someone goes in front of you. So one time at my school, I was playing with my friends, and we were in our pretend cars, and when in the pretend line.
Yeah, I think I heard him say he was in a Zen class. That's a great school for a 6-year-old. And your friend cut in line. Is that what you said? How did you feel when your friend cut in line?
A little sad.
A little sad. Were you kind of angry because your friend cut in front of you?
Yeah, we were playing pretend cars.
Right. But you know what's really good? Is your friend got what your friend wanted. And that's a good thing sometimes. Right? Because then maybe next time your friend, I'm sure you would never cut in line, would you?
No.
No. Maybe next time, if you decide to cut in line, which you shouldn't do, I would never give that advice to a child, but maybe if you do, your friend will let you get what you want. Sometimes it's nice to let people get what they want. We could all try that sometimes. Yeah, thanks, Hunter. All right, so we'll close on that. May the benefit of this practice, as we join palms, may the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Simba during his time of rebirth and to the Hatch family as they suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering.